Edwards, the coffee with the extra flavor left, brings you Night Editor. Again, the presses roll to bring us Hal Burdick and another Night Editor story. And tonight he's going to retell a story that listeners everywhere have asked him to repeat. His story of a letter written by a father to his son overseas, titled, For Later Delivery.
I am writing to you tonight because there are some things I have to say. And putting them down like this seems the best way to get them into words. The things that should have been said so long ago. The things a father sometimes forgets to tell his boy. What having you for a son meant to me. And how sorry I am for the times I failed you.
Friends, I think you'll agree that when you buy coffee, what you're really buying is coffee enjoyment. The pleasure that comes from coffee with a full, rich flavor. Now, that's why I'd like to invite you to try a pound of Edwards coffee. Because Edwards coffee, make no mistake, gives you an extra flavor lift. It is a rich, full-flavored coffee, an exclusive blend of Latin America's choicest coffees, blended and roasted in a special way, according to Mr. Dwight Edwards' own personal formula. Yes, you'll find that every pound of Edwards coffee gives you coffee enjoyment at its best. So try a pound, won't you? If you're not thoroughly satisfied, your money refunded. Edwards Coffee is featured at all Safeway stores. Well, Jane Holmes, the food editor, has been in Hal's office tonight discussing some feature ideas for her daily page. But a moment ago, Bobby saw them leave the newsroom. He guessed what was happening, and as soon as he could get free from his desk, Bobby headed down the corridor to the food department kitchen, and there he...
just as I thought. Having coffee without saying a word to me about it.
We might have known you'd show up sooner or later.
When the Edwards coffee is being served, I'll be there as sooner as I can get there.
Shall we let him stay, Hal?
I guess so, Jane. Might as well be charitable. Though he may not want to stay.
And why not?
Well, Hal has a letter that he's going to read to me.
It's one I read to you, Bobby. A couple of years ago.
Say, if it's the letter I think it is, the one the father wrote to his son in the Army and left with Hal for later delivery, you couldn't bribe me to leave.
Well, that's the one, Bobby.
And you're to be a very quiet young man while he reads it.
You won't hear a sound out of me.
All right, Hal.
Well, as I told you, Jane, this isn't a story. It's, just a letter. But one that someday will mean a lot to a certain young fellow when I hand it over to him. A letter that may help him to see life a little clearer. I know it did that for me when I read it, as the father told me I might. Anyway, this is it. The letter that was left with me for later delivery. My dear son, I am especially conscious of the stillness in my den tonight. Perhaps it's because so many, many nights have passed without you and your gang crashing open the door to the garden and hurrying by me as I sat at my typewriter on your way to the kitchen in search of whatever food the refrigerator might contain. Perhaps it's because a parade of years has marched by since you used to crash that same door as a little fellow, and in a quick passing, no longer than it took to say, "Hi, Dad," leave behind you a shambles of cast-off windbreaker, far-flung BB shot, scattered rugs, that I was forever calling you back to set to rights again. Or perhaps it's because of the telegram. However it is, tonight is terribly still. Outside, the stars are close and brittle. Sharp point stars, you used to call them on winter nights. Gray fog is sliding over the ridge of distant hills, and there's the spice of eucalyptus in the air. It seems important to tell you all that, because it's your kind of night. I'm writing you tonight because there are some things I have to say, and putting them down like this seems to be the best way to get them into words. The things that should have been said so long ago. The things a father sometimes forgets to tell his son. No, I don't mean the facts of life, or fold your napkin or stand when a lady comes into the room. I'm thinking of the something else I never quite got into words. What having you for a son really meant to me, and how sorry I am for the times I failed you. It's funny. When you were born and I held you in my arms that first time, I thought I was going to tell you all that when you grew up. I was so proud that night that Mother had given me a son that I meant always to let you see my pride in you from that time on. I meant you should always know how glad I was for you, that I'd never failed you. How weak it seems now to say. I never meant to. Why didn't I tell you how proud I was that time you hung a mouse on the toughie in kindergarten because he broke a little girl's soap bubble pipe? I said the fatherly things to you about fighting in public and acting like a ruffian. Later, I bragged to your mother that you were a chip off the old block and recounted the story of a hallway scrap that got me kicked out of school for a time. But I never got around to telling you. Then there was the time you broke the big window in the neighbor's house with the first professional baseball I bought you. You played square and told me about it the minute I got home that night. You couldn't know that I was especially tired, that my nerves were like fiddle strings. You said, "I'll earn the money to pay for it, Dad." And I answered, "You bet you will. I didn't give you that baseball to go around smashing expensive windows. If you can't be careful with it, I'll have to take it away from you." I paid for the window. And through a long period of months, you denied yourself every little pleasure to save nickels and dimes to pay me back. And when the last of it was paid, I didn't tell you how proud I was that you'd met an obligation. I said, now, let that be a lesson to you to be careful the next time. I said that to you, the son who meant so much to me. And maybe I lost some little part of you in saying it. I didn't tell you. And tonight, I wish so lonesomely that I had. I could set down 100 such incidents writing you tonight. The times when you looked at me with that something in your eyes that said, "Can't we go halvers on this one, Dad?" And I made you take the full responsibility because I thought you should. The times I failed you. But my mind jumps ahead to the spring of 1941 when you wrote me from college saying you wanted to apply for an appointment as a cadet flyer. You didn't say anything more about it after you got my reply. The words of that letter must have looked very cold to you when you read it. All about education coming first, your duty to your mother and me. You didn't answer because the years had taught you it was no use. You came home unexpectedly a few weeks later. You cringed a little when I demanded gruffly what you were doing away from college, and then you drew yourself up very straight and tall and saluted me. I asked what that meant, and you held out the paper that told of your appointment as a cadet in an Army flying school. You couldn't know it was hurt pride that made me say what I did about your taking such an important step without consulting me further. You couldn't know that inside me there was a very different pride. Pride in you for doing it. You only heard me say the things about not being dutiful toward your parents. Once again, I hadn't gone halvers with you. Once again, I'd failed you. I tried to make it up by showing interest in your progress as a flyer, your graduation to a lieutenancy. But I knew all along I was only making it up to myself, not to you. It was too late for that. Then there was that night about a month after Pearl Harbor, the night you came home on leave. We knew from your letters you were expecting to be ordered out soon, out across the Pacific where there was a war to be won. And I promised myself that while you were here, I'd tell you the things I'd failed to tell you all those times in the past. My love for you, the deep joy of having a son, even though I hadn't always let you see it. I meant to do it. But, well, she was with you when you came into the house that night. And there was that same look of hopeful expectancy in your eyes when you said, "Dad, this is Mary, my wife. We were married 2 days ago." I guess you weren't surprised when I reacted as I did after all those times in the past. I was polite, but you read what was in my mind, and it hurt you. Just as you were hurt when I took breaking the window the way I did, and punching the toughie's nose, and leaving college to join up as a cadet and all the other things. And those things I meant to tell you before you went away never were said. Tonight, the telegram came to Mary. You didn't know, of course, that we brought her here to live with us a few weeks after you went overseas. Your mother left the telegram on my desk, then hurried back upstairs. It was a long time after I read it before I could get out of my desk chair. When I did, I went out into the yard, out through the old familiar garden door, out under the brittle stars, your sharp point stars. They seemed to be the only thing in life that was real to me. And then I heard something that was real, very real, From Mary's room upstairs, a sharp little cry, like the one I heard that night when you were born. A cry calling out to me as you called to me the first night I held you in my arms. The cry of your son, my grandson. I heard it, and it was like you calling to me again. And so I came back in to write this letter, to say the things I always meant to say, even though they come too late. Maybe tonight you're looking down at me from up there among your sharp point stars. Maybe you heard that little cry, and you're saying, "It's all right, Dad. I'll understand if you'll just promise me this, that you'll go halvers with me this time in him. That you'll remember to say the things to him you didn't say to me, as I had meant to say them if I ever had a son. Do that, and we'll call it square." And that's why I'm writing this letter you'll never see. This letter I'll have put into your son's hands someday. To thank you for giving me a second chance and to make you that promise. Good night, my son. Your Dad.
Friends, just as a good story gives you a real lift at the end, so a cup of good coffee should give you a grand feeling of satisfaction. You've a right to expect that. And believe me, with Edwards Coffee, you not only can expect it, you get it. Yes, a delicious extra flavor lift. That's because Edwards Coffee is blended and roasted under Mr. Dwight Edwards' personal formula, with the care and skill which comes only from an expert knowledge of fine coffees. Well, just to show you, the coffee beans selected for the exclusive Edwards blend are actually chosen for size, shape, and color. They're blended only in small batches, then roasted by the controlled thermal process which develops the full natural flavor and aroma. And note this, just when the roast comes to the point of golden brown perfection, when flavor's at its very finest, then every pound's immediately ground and vacuum packed to capture all the fresh, rich flavor. Try a pound of Edwards Coffee. If you don't thoroughly enjoy its extra flavor lift, your money refunded. Edwards Coffee is featured at all Safeway stores. Well, I know all of us enjoyed the retelling of tonight's appealing story, Hal. What's ahead for us next week?
Well, we're going in for some smiles, and the humorous story of the night Horace Twining's curiosity led him into trying his hand at throwing a boomerang, and the amazing series of developments that followed. It's titled, Boomerangs Do Come Back. And I hope you'll all join us for a few smiles when I tell it next week at this same time. Good night.
Be sure to listen at the same time next week when the roar of the presses brings us Hal Burdick and another original Night Editor yarn. This is Bill Baldwin saying good night for Edwards Coffee.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.